Thanks for joining me today for Think Big with Michael Zellner, sponsored by Sleepy Z's Masonry. My guest today is writer and director Jonathan Bowen, who's joining me today for episode 178. Jonathan is the president and owner of JLB Media Productions in Burbank, California. He is a member of the Hollywood Directors Guild of America, which is the only union representing directors in the country. He has received numerous film awards at festivals all over the country, including playing at over 40 film festivals, which has received him 25 nominations for his work. And he also has 8 wins at those festivals, which anyone in the movie and film industry knows how hard and how awesome that is. He's here today to talk about a little bit about the industry and to talk about That's Hollywood indie drama, his new movie, The Comic Shop, which stars SAG Award winner Jesse Metcalf, who was in the movie On a Wing and a Prayer, Tristan Mays, Eric Roberts, and Micah Giovanni. Appreciate you coming on the show today, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to be here.
My pleasure. What early experiences or films inspired you to pursue a career in filmmaking in general? And how those influences shaped your, style and directional styles?
Yeah. So for me, it was really Star Wars that inspired me to pursue filmmaking. It was kind of like the special edition re-releases where I got to go see the original Star Wars on the big screen. And I had seen it so many times, but I really do feel like the advertising was right. I feel like I hadn't seen it at all because it was always on the tiny little screen. Right. And it was that experience where I went and we tried to get tickets for like a 2:30, 3 p.m. showing. They were sold out till 10:30, which blew my mind because I thought everyone has this movie at home, don't we? I mean, how could it be sold out for 8 hours? And so then we go to the showing and people are like dressed up and they've got the lightsabers and they're clapping at every moment of the movie. And at first I thought it was kind of weird, I'll be honest. I thought, wow, like this is really intense. But then I got to thinking, like, this is 20 years later and these people feel so passionately about this movie. And I thought, well, that's amazing. Like I want to do something like that where you can actually inspire people to care about something for so long.
Right.
So that kind of started me thinking like, well, I don't know what I want to do for sure, but I know I want to do something in film. And I originally gravitated towards like special effects. I think also because I didn't want to think too big, maybe. Like and I'm not saying that's small, but I'm saying I thought, well, there's only one director. There's probably a couple hundred special effects artists.
Right.
So maybe I could do something like that. And then I kind of took some programming classes and I delved into things a bit and realized I don't have the aptitude for this. This isn't really it. And then I kind of thought about it more. And as I became a bigger fan, I thought, well, it wasn't the special effects that drew me to Star Wars. It really was the story, the mythology, the connection I have to the characters. So that's kind of what led me to be like, I want to be a storyteller. And writer, director made sense. So
did you grow up in the 90s?
Yeah, so I was born in 82.
Okay.
So like the late 80s and 90s were kind of like my time for, soaking all that stuff in. And it was funny because I guess when I was a kid, Star Wars was kind of in its dormant phase, in the late 80s. But nonetheless, every kid I knew loved Star Wars. We all owned it. I actually knew this kind of weird kid who his parents, like, I'm not joking with this, his parents would make him read encyclopedias when he had spare time. Like he was basically, they were training this guy to be like the world's next president or something,
Right.
And so he only owned 3 movies and they were the 3 Star Wars movies.
Wow.
So it was like, oh, you were allowed to have the Holy Trilogy, but that's it.
I never did see the re-release. I know the original Star Wars came out in 77. So 20 years later, 97, I mean, obviously the special effects must have just been incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was kind of they had done such a good job cleaning up the movies as far as like the matte lines and really making everything shine. And I know how much work they had to do just to restore and preserve the film because I
Right,
guess the negative wasn't in great condition. So I'm sure this contributes. Having seen the VHS so many times, I don't think my VHS copies were probably in very pristine shape either.
right,
So then seeing it on the big screen, I thought, wow, I can't believe this movie's 20 years old. I mean, it looks
right,
better than a lot of the movies coming out right now. So that was kind of a early a formative experience that I really want to pursue film. And then I kind of got into like, well, if I want to do film, I need to watch the classics. I need to start studying like everything that's come before because I really believe that if you want to contribute something to an art, you need to know the history of the art because you can't just be throwing something in there and you think it's original, but it's actually not. You just haven't seen that much, you
right,
know? So I kind of started a review site at the end of high school that I
right.
ran through most of college and just tried to see all of the classic movies I could. But it's time consuming and you
Sure.
always talk to people. I remember being in college talking to my dad's friends who were 50, 60, and they had seen so many movies, and now I realize, well, yeah, they just had a lot more decades to watch them.
That's funny. I'm an 80s kid and I think, it's easy everybody can say, "Ah, my era was the best," but I think the 80s movies and that time period and the music and everything was
Oh
just such a
yeah.
great time.
Me too. Yeah. Oh, I think it's like still one of my favorite things, and Amazon Prime's pretty good at this. Where you're looking for something you haven't seen, like some sort of hidden gem or maybe a cult classic, and then every once in a while I'll come across some 80s movie I haven't seen. And I always feel like that's a little bit of a treasure, because it's like, oh, I love this era of movies. So and there's always that like, how did I not see this? But
Right.
but then you realize, well, I was 4 years old, and maybe it just came to streaming recently because it's been buried in a vault for 20, 30 years. So
Absolutely. And it's funny going back now, even if you go on like a YouTube and watch TV shows from the 70s and 80s compared to now and everything, it's just unbelievable the difference. I mean, you can
right.
tell someone doesn't have to tell you when the show was made.
Yeah, that's the truth. I know. It's funny thinking about the kind of TV shows that I loved when I was growing up, like Quantum Leap or The
Yeah.
X-Files, the original MacGyver, things like that.
Yeah.
And good shows, but the budgets of today's TV series are absolutely insane. I mean, Disney will go spend $200 million on an 8 episode Star Wars series. And back in the day, the X-Files, I believe, I could be wrong, but I hear it was about 1.2 million an episode. So it wasn't much money. You're talking about like an indie film budget to make something about half the length of an indie film, but still, there's not a lot of money there.
I mean, and you see, like, I've had a couple of actors from the show Blue Bloods, CBS drama that's on Friday night on a
Right.
podcast. And, it's ending this month after a
Oh,
14-year run. And number one slot on Friday night, still one of the top dramas, has two of the top actors, and Tom Selleck and Donnie Wahlberg. And CBS decided to end it because it cost too much to make.
oh yeah. I've heard about that a couple times where it's like the show's doing fine, but is the cost is so high that there's almost no level of success that could have saved it. It just doesn't work out financially anymore.
Yeah,
That's such a
absolutely.
shame though.
It is a shame, and I'm really surprised that streaming services or someone didn't pick it up. Supposedly there's supposed to be a spinoff, but yeah, I was really surprised because the show was still doing very well, and all the actors still wanted to continue. I mean, you look at
Uh,
Tom Selleck, who's 79, but you wouldn't know it by looking at him. You think
right.
he's probably 60s, by looking at him. Yeah,
That's so awesome.
but it does happen. You have two full length movies under your belt, and JLB Media Productions has produced over 1,000 videos for companies nationwide. I believe you've shot videos in over 47 different states across the country, DC, Canada. Can you describe your creative process when developing a short film, or video for these companies, and how you approach script writing, casting, and visual storytelling?
Sure. For most of our corporate stuff, it is pretty assembly lined. So we've done a lot of senior living videos where we actually, have the basic outline that works. And we will adapt it depending on the company. Like a different company might want to put a different take on it.
Sure.
But I swear we pitched them more original ideas sometimes. And a lot of times I just get shot down. No, we just want to do what we always do. I'm like, okay, don't say I didn't try. So
Right.
I thought, for instance, like a day in the life of kind of thing where we follow a senior around and really show what does your day look like when you live in a senior living community, because a lot of them they're not nursing homes. Like people think, well, I would never put my mom or dad in a nursing home. These places, some of them that we filmed out, are absolutely amazing. I'm talking like you can drive still. A lot of the residents can.
Right.
Valet parking, a home theater. One of them had a gym where you put your punch card in and it remembers the last weight you did on every single machine. So you don't have
Unreal.
to remember for you. And they have a trainer that's there 40 hours a week. One of them poached one of the top chefs from their city and hired him to do all the cooking. So instead of serving you like cafeteria level food, they actually have a real chef bringing you a meal, and he prepares
Amazing.
stuff every day. So it is not what some people might think of. And so that's what we try to showcase when we do, let's say, videos for that.
Right.
But a lot of the other stuff is like maybe based around interviews, and you kind of get the story once you have the interviews. So somebody, I'm not as involved in the day to day as I used to be, but my top employee will say, okay, so what messaging is important here? What does the client want to focus on? And kind of build the structure around those interviews.
Do you
So when
think
it,
that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
oh no, go ahead, yeah.
Do you think that part of the reason why people want to stay with the basic is that so many people have just such a hard time making changes?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think they might be nervous that what if we go off and do something different and then it doesn't work as well as the tried and true. There is probably always that nervousness, and but a lot of our corporate stuff, like I feel like the times that I've got to pitch something creatively, we haven't landed those projects a lot of times. And what happens is that companies, they are sometimes they already have their company. And so they reach out to us. What they're really looking for is a bid so that they
Yeah.
can tell their existing company, hey, look, these guys would do this video for 60 grand and you guys want to charge us 120. And then maybe that company comes back and says, well, we could do it for 80 or 90 or something like that. And most of our videos are very small budget. They're much smaller than that, which means you don't really get to do much creative with it. But some of the ones that I got to pitch were like potentially really fun. We had like a truck clean energy thing where it was going to be filmed at the Vegas airport, Port of Long Beach. And then we had that's right. We had like a tour part of it where they go off, into different parts of the desert. I think the Hoover Dam or something like that they were going to do. So some of these creative concepts, like that was kind of why I started the company, is because I thought, well, it's a way to make money. Like
Sure.
businesses need videos, but also there's some opportunity for creativity. And then as the years went on, there was no creativity because there was never the budget to hire me as a director. So I'm never on the shoots, and nor do they even occur near where I am usually. And so then there's not really any writing. And so what I really am doing is hiring a videographer, doing the bookkeeping, managing the website, managing employees, things like that. Very business-like, but not very creative. And so that's why I kind of felt like I was like dying inside a bit until I could make something like the comic shop, because it wasn't what I signed up for. And you know how life has a tendency to just kind of move along faster. And so you think, well, I'll get another chance, I'm sure it will happen, but a year becomes 3 years, becomes pretty soon a decade
Yeah.
since I had done my last feature. And you start wondering, when is it going to happen again? Or am I going to get another chance? So that was kind of the impetus where it's like, I was very passionate about this project, and I was like, this has to be, my vehicle. This has to be the way to kind of like get back to what I want to do. And it was a very personal story, which I thought was a good choice for what this was.
Awesome. Can you share a pivotal moment, in the early days of JLB media that sort of shaped the direction of your company?
Yeah, yeah. There was. I think so. Sometimes when it's early and you're kind of like in survival mode, almost like we just need to survive to grow because we can't grow if we're just not making enough money to stick around. So
Right.
we had talked to this company, Brookdale Senior Living. And at the time, Brookdale was, I believe, the biggest senior living company in the US. They had more than 600 communities themselves
Wow.
just nationwide, which is absolutely nuts. But they were also very cheap. And so my sales lady told me that, well, they really want to make videos for like, I think the original suggestion was like $500 and $1,000. And I laughed at her and I said, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, no, thank you. No. And so then, she kind of let it go, but the next day she calls me again and she said, well, I just want to, is there any way we could do this? Because if there is some way, I mean, 600 videos is a lot of videos. And so we kind of brainstormed and we said, well, what if we offered a package where there's no crew, there's just the videographer, and we do a 2 hour shoot and there's a 3 hour shoot. And we make a package where like one package is like, I think it was like 695 and the other package was 995. And if we pay the videographer only a couple $100, the editing is really quick. The videos are 60 seconds long, or maybe 90 seconds at most for the
Right.
longer one. Then we figured we could do this and eke out, a couple $100 on every video. And the only way we're going to make money is to do massive volume. And so, of course, nowadays I would never consider a client like this. But at the time, we didn't have a lot of work and we did so much volume that it also helped us establish that nationwide network of videographers. And it was a big name company for our industry. So
Yeah.
it kind of like catapulted us into doing more and more senior living with actual real paid clients. So eventually Brookdale got absorbed, I believe, by oh, what is that company? Well, there's another huge company. It was number one and number two merged.
Yeah.
And it isn't that America, right? Like we see
Yeah.
that where
All the
it's like,
time.
oh boy, these huge players are merging, Emeritus. I think it was Emeritus. And the thing that sucked about that is I think Brookdale was the one who bought them and we'd stopped working with them. So we were actually in talks with number two and we were gonna,
Oh,
they had like their own 500 communities. And all of those talks broke down because when they got acquired, they pretty much cleaned house and fired everybody in the marketing department because they already had their own marketing department.
yeah.
So yeah, that's corporate work sometimes.
But what you did also in doing that is you helped to brand yourself,
Yes.
and getting your name out there, which is important. It sounds a little similar to, I was in the mattress and furniture business for 19 years.
Oh yeah.
And, we sold at a discounted rate and we did everything on volume to compete with, the big nationwide mattress firm stores and things like that. And we had to do it that way in order to be able to get the business. But, we just tried to make a little bit off of everyone instead of a lot off of one person.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's kind of, we've done that with a couple clients where it's like per video, it doesn't make a ton of sense. Like it's not very great. But if we can get it sort of assembly lined, then the volume, gets you there. We had another one called Carmercial, and they were like a car dealership marketing company that did stuff nationwide. And they paid basically nothing. I think it was gosh, I'm trying to think. It was like $300 or so. But the deal is that we didn't have to edit the videos.
Okay.
All they would take care of the editing. All I had to do was find videographers. But the problem is that that's not much money. So I think I'd pay the videographer about $125 for just 2 hours. And they would go and just get some dealership materials and then, send it back to these guys. And it sounds like the pay is pretty crappy, but usually we would do multiples. So like we even had one guy where he did 4 of these shoots in a day. And so, he gets $500 for the day. And I shot some myself because they were so easy that if it came up in my area, if you consider like what they were looking for, no interviews, no lighting, no audio, just camera, just B-roll. And
Yeah.
so it's the easiest thing in the world to film because I just bring my tripod camera, get some nice looking shots, which is kind of fun, honestly, anyways. And I like to get out of the office. So like, so I
Sure.
eventually I started shooting some things when they came up near me, sort of to save the company money, but also just as something to do. Like it was nice to get out into the field and go shoot my own stuff sometimes. And so my sales lady would send me an email like, "Hey, this is in your area. You want to do it?" And I remember taking a shoot that was about 4 hours away once, and I had to do like an overnight. It was not worth it. Like it was one of those things where I think I got $750, but I had to pay for the hotel out of that as well. And then
Right.
asked to get, 8 hours of driving. And I get back home and I look at my wife and I'm like, I don't think I'm doing that again. That was not really worth it.
That's
But
funny.
earlier times you take what you can get and try to survive. And now we're 16 years old. So, we're getting up there.
Yeah. And now everybody thinks they're a videographer today with their
Right.
phones. I mean,
Oh,
come
I
on.
know.
I mean,
Yeah,
you
true.
see people, I mean, holding up their phones, filming things rather than helping people or, whatever it is. But everybody, that's all they want to do because they're like,
I
oh my
know.
God, if I could get this on the internet and I get the amount of clicks and stuff, this good, I could go viral instead of having some
Right.
empathy and sympathy for people that maybe needed your help.
Yeah. The other thing is just not enjoying what you were there to enjoy. Like I
Yeah.
saw people, I'm at the Stanley Cup final game with the Vegas Golden Knights a couple years ago. And, people are like sitting there and they're not even looking at the game. They're looking through their phone.
Oh,
And it's one thing to get a quick video, that's great. Like,
sure.
pull it out, get a little thing. But I mean, they're doing this for 10 minutes in a row and they're just staring through the phone. I'm like, are you here to watch it? I mean, because you could have sat home and watched somebody's phone video. Like, you were actually present right here where history is being made. So, just take it in and enjoy. And, there's the old joke about when people travel, like, let's say it's the Eiffel Tower. They go, they look down at their phone, real quick picture up, and then just move on. Like, did you actually see the Eiffel Tower, or do you just kind of point the camera at it and say, well, I got it? I'm like,
Yeah.
they're checking off boxes instead of really taking it in. And so I try to leave my phone pretty much in my pocket most of the time. We have some designated times, like, let's say my wife and I are hiking, we'll stop at the top and be like, oh, let's get a picture. It's pretty.
Right.
But you have to be enjoying your life, not just through the digital media.
It's amazing when you go, even when you go to a restaurant, Jonathan, you see a family of 4 or 5 or 6 sitting at a table. They're not even talking
Yeah, no
anymore.
one's talking. Yeah, we
It's
we just saw this a couple weeks ago. It was like it looked like two couples, and there was not a word. Each of the couples was just on their phone, and they were a little smiling. Oh, they're looking down, smiling at the phone. And I'm like, why even go hang out with people if you're just gonna be on your phone?
I
It does
know.
not make sense.
Yeah, if I ever go, now, I mean, I'm not in the bar scene anymore, but if I go out to eat with friends and everything, I literally will say with them, I go, guys, turn your phone over. I mean, literally, let's have conversations. Whatever you're looking at on Instagram or Twitter X or whatever it is, it can wait.
Yeah, it'll
You
still be
know,
there.
yeah. I mean, it's right. Exactly. It's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere.
It can wait, and because people just don't enjoy each other anymore. And
No.
I think it honestly, obviously, it starts with the parents at home. But so many kids today do not have the people skills that you and I grew up with. I mean, we're a
Right.
generation apart, but that you and I grew up with.
Yeah, we would have got yelled at for that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
I
I mean, if
mean,
I didn't say yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and please and thank you, it was the belt or the switch.
right. Yeah, I know there was a little more sense of respect, and it is funny. So my wife is younger, and then her brother is much younger. So my brother-in-law is 14 years old, one of them.
Wow.
And I
That's
also have a brother-in-law, my sister, who's younger than me. Her husband is way older. He's almost 60. So I've
okay.
got these two brother-in-laws way separated.
That's
Well,
cool.
if you tell a 14-year-old that when you were growing up, there was no internet, like it didn't exist for us. I mean, maybe there was an internet at the Defense Agency Advanced Project, whatever. But like for us normal people, we remember the internet like actually coming into being. We got all the AOL discs and I remember back when we first had it and it was 5 hours a month. That's it. So when you sent an email, you weren't online until you sent it. You wrote it offline, and then you connected to push send, and then you were back out because you don't want to waste your 5 hours, for the whole month.
Right.
So kids today, they think that the internet is basically running water or electricity. Like, what do you mean there was no internet? The internet's always existed as far as they're concerned.
Sure.
So it's a
Yeah.
very different time.
I bet the majority of kids today, I'd say, I'm just ballparking. I bet at least 90%, if you said, I'll give you $1 million, but you can't be on the internet for 6 months, just 6 months, they wouldn't do it. They
Yeah,
could, they
sure.
couldn't. And even adults too now, because we're
Right,
so, you know what I mean? Because people are so like, what do I do? What do I do?
right.
This is my whole life now. But yeah, you're right. It's
You're
completely
right.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely different times.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced in the industry, particularly as an independent producer?
Yeah, boy, there's always a lot. I mean, independent filmmaking is really tough. And I think one of the biggest things is that there isn't a clear path. Like, one of my friends is a radiologist, and very difficult. I mean, he makes it through med school, and he's very successful. But him and I were talking about this once, and he said it's very tough, but my path was always defined. Like, you do this, you have to study hard and you do well, then you move to the next step. Whereas for filmmaking, maybe you think you're moving forward, but then it doesn't really go to where you want it to go. And then every time that you ask somebody else or look at their interviews, like, how did they make it? It's not repeatable. Like, most of the time it's like, oh, well, they knew this guy, and okay, well, I don't know that guy. And
Yeah.
then it's like everybody's working hard. So that's not the deciding factor. But I think for indie films, it's very much that you need certain people, you need people in them, right? So if you make an indie movie with absolutely no one in it, it is just so hard to get it recognized. And a lot of it is us as a society, right? Because the first thing I will do if you told me you saw a movie like Pink Wall Art, I'd be like, oh, I've never heard of it. Who's in that one? And if you told me like, oh, well, no one's in it, it's just like an indie film, then I might be like, oh, okay, I might not check it out.
Sure.
But if somebody says, "Oh, it's the new Tom Cruise movie," oh, okay, well, I'll check that one out. So there's always that sense of like that, even if the actors sometimes aren't the greatest actors, which there's a couple people who are known who are, they're okay, they're not great, but you know who they are, and
Yeah.
that I think gives a sort of like credence to it, almost like, oh, it's a real movie then. Like,
Yeah.
if so and so's in it, it's a real movie.
Right.
And so I think that because also we have so much content out there, right? That it makes sense. You have to be protective of your time. Even for me, I mean, I watch so many movies. I usually watch a couple movies a day. I'm almost amazed I can keep finding stuff after years and years, 750 movies a year. 5 years later, you've seen all these movies and you keep finding new stuff still. So that's the thing, is how do you cut through that noise? How do you get people to say, I want to check this movie out? And a lot of it, I think, is just, it comes down to, building a buzz for something, and that, which is difficult to do when you're also
Sure.
not a name yourself.
Yeah.
So I think those are the biggest things. Actually making the movie, I honestly, it's hard work, but that's the fun part. It's kind of like, how do we get something and get it out there? And then when you're casting it, how do you get people to say yes to the project? So
Did you ever see the 1985 movie Vision Quest? Matthew Modine.
yeah, but it was a long time ago.
Okay. I was just
Yeah.
wondering if you saw that one. I know you were three. It has such a great message in it. Linda Fiorentino, I think it was Madonna's first movie where she
Oh,
was
that's
on
right.
stage in there. So it's one of my sort of, besides the Rocky movies and the motivational
Nice.
movies, when I'm walking or running on my treadmill. But yeah, I
Oh,
was just wondering,
totally.
I was just thinking about that movie when you talked about movies that you maybe hadn't seen. But see, yeah,
Yeah.
you've seen that one too.
I should go back and see it again though, because I just had that happen with, what is it? Oh, I'm blanking the name. Early Eric Roberts breakout role, and so the distributor asked me, it's one of his favorite movies, if I had seen it, and I said, yeah, I saw it, but it was like the first year in college, So I said, I'll do you a favor. I'm gonna go back and watch that again, you know? So I went and saw it again a couple months ago. And it's always good to refresh because I feel like
Yeah.
if I haven't seen a movie in 20 years, I might not remember much besides my impression or like
Yeah.
some general feeling about it. And maybe there'll be something key that sticks out to me, but it's good to see a movie again and kind of remember what those things are.
He was in a great movie. I forget that it was with Stallone and Sharon Stone was in it, late 90s. And I forget the name of it, where they were like, killer kind of people and stuff. And now I'm going to have to go find out what the name of that movie was. But I mean, Eric Roberts was one of the stars of that movie back with Sylvester
Nice.
Stallone and Sharon Stone. That was a good
Yeah,
movie.
he's so great. I mean, I actually love like the his little appearance on Entourage, like the episode where he's
Yeah,
it's just a great episode. He's so funny in it. And boy, I mean, he was still like in such good shape in that role, which was what, only about 15 years ago.
I
And he's
know.
like he's showing drama, his six pack, you know. And Eric keeps so busy. He's just you can tell how much he loves it.
Yeah.
And with our little cameo in the movie, it was the same. He just I think he really likes being on set. I think he really enjoys meeting new people. The guy's just a treasure, you know. He's just like he's somebody who really you can tell does this for the love of it.
Right.
Um, and, it isn't like there are definitely those people where it just I think that they're beyond that. They're grumpy. They're like they've created a big lifestyle and they need to make money to support that lifestyle,
Yeah.
but they've lost the passion for why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't feel like that about somebody like Eric because he just is so excited to meet everybody. He says hello to all the grips, the PAs,
That's nice.
pictures with them. Like he was just having a good time, you know.
That's
And
good to
we were
hear.
having a good time because of it. So that was
That
really nice.
that's awesome. You had the 10-year break we talked about between doing,
Right.
full length movie, your first feature film, I believe that the poster behind you there, Amy Allison Fans,
Yes.
won Best Comedy Feature at two festivals nationwide, as well as other awards. Then you decided to jump back in with the comic shop.
Yeah.
What inspired you to do the comic shop, and how did your personal influences influence the story?
Right. So comic shop was very personal to me. I grew up going to comic stores like all the time as a kid. I'd say once a week, but it might have been sometimes two or three times a week, depending
Yeah.
on what I could get my mom to agree to. And so there was one comic shop that I specifically went to more often. And there was a guy at that shop who owned it named Mike. And he was really helpful. He kind of like was there throughout different interests. You know how kids switch quickly, like what they're into?
Yeah.
So one year it was Marvel, like comic cards. Another year it was Magic the Gathering. Then another year it was Spawn. And these kinds of things. So Mike was always my dealer. He was always there for me. And some of the scenes and some of the parts of the movie are like directly inspired by that. I did go to a convention just locally. It was like a Portland comic convention. And I helped him with like some of the stuff there. And he kind of said, if you help me with this, I can help you go get this rare Spawn action figure that you're looking for because I know somebody's going to have it there. So basically, as the years went on, Mike wasn't really as present as he used to be. There were all of a sudden there's employees, and I would ask them where's Mike because it was the connection that I had with him
Yeah.
that kept me coming to the store.
Yeah.
So they were, oh, he's an appointment, he's out today, and pretty soon they would kind of just be honest and say, he's across the street drinking. And when you're like 11 or 12, I don't really know what that means. Like, I mean, I get the idea, but like, I don't know why you'd be doing that at 2 p.m. or something
Yeah.
like that. So then gradually, the store shut down, and I heard from one of the other owners that he went to drive for UPS. That was really the last I heard about it. And it was sad because you lose your primary
Sure.
place. So as an adult, this script was kind of me trying to make sense of this childhood story. Like, was Mike unhappy because he didn't want to be running the comic store, or were things going poorly and he just kind of that was what made him sad? So then I imagined that maybe Mike had a bigger dream. Like there was something else he really wanted to do. And then I also kind of wanted to write Mike the happy ending that he didn't get. Like the real life Mike, I'm not saying he never got it. I don't know, but
Sure.
in my version of events, like he didn't get that happy ending. So then what I did is I took myself and sort of superimposed me onto both of the characters. So Brandon is like young Jonathan, Mike is like cynical middle-aged Jonathan, and before making this movie. And that's kind of where the inspiration came from, where it's like there's little pieces of me in each, and it's like you can watch them interact, but there also is the fictional elements and
Sure.
a whole character created from different influences.
That's awesome. What a great idea. Can you discuss the process developing Jesse Metcalf's character, Mike,
Right.
and specific traits, the backstory elements, that were important to convey, that were important for you to convey to everybody?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. One thing we really wanted is that Mike has kind of given up as far as like he's not looking for a second chance. There is the difference. Like I was looking for a second chance, but Mike's character, he's going through the motions. I mean, he's got the pictures behind him that he draws, and he still does draw. He still makes time to illustrate each week, but he started to feel like some sort of drawing block, basically. Like I don't know, the inspiration and passion isn't there as much, which he kind of gets back from Brandon, like seeing that youthful exuberance. So we made Mike fairly cranky, at the start of it. He's kind of a misanthrope, but I think part of it is that honestly, he's just hung over a lot. Like it's not even that he's as grumpy as he comes across as. He just has a headache and he woke up with another, to sleeping another one off. And when people bug him about real world issues, he doesn't want to talk about that. And I think he knows deep down he's got to make a change. Like something has to change, but he's just not in a place where he can like make that to get that motivation, I guess. So a lot of it, what Jesse and I talked about, is that this is a character who has immense talent, but the world has kind of beaten him down. It maybe hasn't given him the opportunities that he deserved, and he kind of fell into this path. So one reason I want to make it so he can't just walk away, or it's not so easy, is when his dad died, his dad gave him money to help him open this comic store. So in some ways, he feels a little tied to it as like his dad's last, if you want to
Sure.
say last wish, last good gesture or something like that. And there was a little inspiration there too, because it was my dad who suggested to me to do corporate video work. I
Oh,
didn't really want to do that, but my dad is very practical. And when I moved down to LA, he was always, well, son, how are you going to make a living doing something like this? And I'm like, I don't know, because I don't even know what I'm doing yet. I just moved
right.
ago, Papa. So then he kind of would tell me like, well, I think, who always needs video and who would be willing to pay is businesses. You should make videos for businesses. And I remember thinking like, oh boy, that sounds boring. But he was right. There was
Sure.
money in that. And it's like, okay, we were kind of like pioneers in that field, because at the time that we were starting, a lot of companies had just launched websites and got pictures, and they said, well, we just paid for the pictures and the website, and why do we need a video now too? And so we had to, pitch them on that. Until about 5, 6 years into the company, they knew they needed videos. So we stopped getting asked the question. And we started getting asked the question, okay, well, why JLB Media Productions? So there were little inspirations in the movie where it's like, I'm not by any means saying my dad forced me into this, but he kind of like gave me that idea. And I wanted to have Mike have sort of a similar inspiration where, he's on this path, and I think things have been going well too. I really do. I think before the pandemic, things were good. And Mike wasn't, he was complacent. When you're in a point where you're making good money, life is pretty good. It's not great. It's not what you dreamed of, but there's nothing to complain about except first world problems. And
Yes.
that's kind of where Mike was until the pandemic hit, and no one goes to the store, and his savings start going under. And you see in the movie, he's living in the back of the store. I don't imagine he was doing that before. I think he had to get rid of his apartment in 2021 or somewhere around there. And he just kind of didn't tell the landlord, and he just kind of curtained it off and said, well, I mean, I have to have the store. That's my source of income. Maybe I could just sleep in the back. And so that's the sad state we find this character in, is that his place is kind of a mess. And is he really sleeping and living behind this curtain in his own store? I mean, that's not a very good life.
Right. No, not at all. Not at all. I watched the trailer on IMDb and thought it was awesome. I highly recommend that people go there and watch it. It's a couple minutes long, and you'll definitely recognize Jesse Metcalf right away from On a Wing and a Prayer, and I know he's been in several other things. How did you collaborate with a combination of Jesse, Tristan, Micah, Eric, and other cast members to bring the characters to life? And were there any memorable moments for you during the filming?
Yeah, well, as far as the different actors go, I mean, really I would try to explain, almost like I would to you, like where these characters are coming from. And Jesse came with very strong ideas and really had done his homework. Like, I can't tell you how much I appreciated that when I saw his binder, and he's got markings all over it. He's written notes to himself how to think of the lines. I mean, Jesse is really a hardworking guy, and he really did his homework, and he really wanted to be there. It wasn't like, oh, these guys are paying me for this indie movie, let me show up. I
Sure.
mean, I could see like he was passionate about it, and he chose this project because it was something he believed
That's
could show
awesome.
range. And so that was really great. And really when it came to the rest of them, everybody was easygoing and easy to work with. Tristan was awesome. She's so natural, and she would always nail her lines. I love Tristan's confidence. Like, there are plenty of actors, even Jesse's like this. I'm used to this, where they want to do as many takes as they can because they always feel they can do better, and I appreciate that. But Tristan would be hilarious because we'd be shooting it and we do like two takes. I thought they were both great. I don't really need a third, but I'm wondering how she feels about it. So I'd be like, "Oh, Tristan, what are you thinking? Like, do you want to go again?" And she'll just be like, "No, I'm good. I think we got it." And I'm like, "Okay, I agree. Moving on." But like,
Awesome.
there are definitely those actors who, if you ask or give them an opportunity, another, they always want another, which I totally get because that's a perfectionist
Sure.
tendency that a lot of us share. But we're also on a time crunch, so sometimes it's good to be like, hey, you know what, I think we nailed it, let's move on, so that if we come across a more difficult scene down the road today, we can make the time for it. Or if there's some technical glitch that happens on film sets where, well, what are we waiting on? Oh, something fell down. I'm like, well, how long is that going to take?
Yeah.
20 minutes, we're all just sitting around waiting. And then all of a sudden it's hurry again. What's the old joke with films, hurry up and wait.
Right. I know a little bit. Just I have a good friend of mine that I grew up with here in Memphis that actually moved to LA in the late 90s. Now he lives in Palm Springs, and he still acts, and he's in his early 50s. And he would used to live in Atlanta and New Orleans a lot. He'd go back and forth because that so much is going on in both of those
Right.
cities.
Oh, yeah.
So in between stuff, he would come up to Memphis. I moved in with my mom a few years ago to help take care of her. But at the time, I had my own house, and he would just come up and stay with me and hang out. And he made one of my upstairs bedrooms into a little studio to do, for his takes and everything that he had to do as for his auditions. And he would have me read with them all the time and do them. And we would go over and over and over. But I mean, he never done, I mean, he was in Sneaky Pete, Magnificent Seven, got to know Ethan Hawke pretty well. I mean, a lot of little stuff. Office Christmas Party, Roots.
Oh, nice.
I mean,
Yeah.
done a lot of those. Never has gotten his like big break, but he's done a lot of stuff with a lot of big people.
That's really
And
fun.
his best friend out there just passed away recently, Chad McQueen, Steve McQueen's son.
Oh,
And
okay. Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
and so, but when you talk about the takes and stuff, professionals, I'm like, David, oh my God, we've done this 6 times. It was great. He goes, no, you don't understand. And so, I mean, sometimes we take 10 or 15 of them. I'm sitting there
Right.
reading with them because you're right. They want to be perfectionists.
Yeah, it definitely can, it can happen. I mean, there's film sets are also tense places where um everybody wants to do their best.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I know I've gotten heated on a film set. Everybody has those moments sometimes. And I
Yeah.
do remember one with Jesse. I think it was the end of a week and we had done about 8 takes. I thought they were really good. I thought he nailed it. So, but he wasn't happy. And Jesse is like, he expects a lot from himself. He wants the best. And I absolutely love that. As a director, it's great.
Yeah.
But it was so funny and kind of awkward because as he's like walking towards me, he's like, "How was that take?" And I said, "I thought it was great, Jesse." And he says, "You're full of it." And then he
Right.
just walks away. And I was just like, oh boy, that's how it goes sometimes. And I think that when he sees things, he'll be like, okay, it turned out well. But you get in this groove where you're either feeling it or not. And I think that you as an actor have to be able to trust the director that it is good and we're not blowing smoke up your butt.
Yeah.
Because if everything is great, then nothing's great.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to criticize in a constructive way and be like, well, let's try this again, but maybe put the emphasis on, like, imagine what you're thinking with this situation that's going on. I want you to think about that when we're doing the next take. So you want to kind of redirect it. And of course, with directing, you don't tell people like how to act or how to feel even. You really just need to set the scene. You need to tell them like, this is what's going on internally. This is what's going on externally. Put yourself in that position and go again.
Yeah.
And good actors will adjust. They will internalize those things, and it may give them a different way to think about the lines and what those lines really mean. Because if you're not thinking about the lines mean, you're just reading lines.
Yeah.
There's nothing behind it. There's no nuance. Versus like if I told you, I want you to picture, that like you just came from your brother's funeral, and now this lady at Starbucks is trying to correct you over what you just said, and you know what you said. So now your line really comes across like how dare she act this way when my brother just died? You're gonna
Sure.
feel that in the way that the line's delivered. Versus if instead, oh, you've had a little bit of a rough day. There was some rain on the way to work, and she's giving you a hard time. Well, that's not going to be the same intensity.
Yeah. That's true.
So,
So Carrot Top had a cameo, huh?
oh, that was so you asked about highlights. That would to me that was one of the highlights. I think it probably has to be like the highlight besides when you finish, you wrap. He was so funny, and Scotty is his name, and he's also just so nice and down to earth, which I didn't know what to expect really. I mean, he's a big
Yeah.
deal in Vegas. He's been on the strip for 20
I've
years,
seen
and
him live a few times in my life.
yeah, and he was so nice, and I had to make about the most awkward request because we were at the comic shop for I think about 7 or 8 days, and we kept meaning to get like a sunset shot in the parking lot, and we just hadn't done it. We just didn't have the time every day. So finally, it's the last day, and I had to basically ask Carrot Top if he minded waiting about 15 minutes while we go grab the shot. And I feel so bad making somebody wait when they're doing you a favor doing this cameo. He
Sure.
completely understood, and he's like, "Oh no, no, I know how filmmaking works. Like, yeah, take the time you guys need." And I was like, "Oh, thank you," because that's
Sure.
not. I had like I was kind of discussing it, and my first AD's like, "Yeah, sure, you go ask him," and I'm like, "Oh, great, okay, let me go ask him." So when he came to set, he came right to me, and he's like, "Hey, so." I have the idea for like what I want to do for this cameo. I've got this whole thing like thought out. And I said, well, I'm glad you do because I actually really don't. Like I haven't really thought of it much. I just heard, oh, do we want to have a Carrot Top cameo? And I said, absolutely, because I think that's going to help set this movie in Vegas as yes, if you have a comic store in Vegas, Carrot Top might show up, right?
Yeah.
So
That was cool.
he was really funny, and he said, "Okay, I'm picturing like I'm a big customer, and I asked Mike to find me some special stuff, and I'm coming into the store, and he's got it for me, and I'm really excited." And so these guys did the scene, and the first take they did, it was, I mean, we were all dying of laughter, but it was F this, F that, everything, there had to be 25 swear words in about 2 minutes. And it was super funny, but of course, my producer comes up to me, like he's hurriedly coming up to me after the take, and he's like, "Get a clean take, get a clean take," you know. And I'm like, "Oh, but that was so funny," and he's like, "We need a clean take for later," you know. And so like, okay, so each take we did got a little bit less cuss words, and then the final take really just has, "I'm carrot top, bitch," you know. That's about it.
Right. That's awesome.
But you know, because you also don't know where your movie's going to go.
Yeah.
So what if it goes to a place where they're like, "Look, we love the movie, but you need to eliminate, you know, the F words," and you've got 50 or 60 of them. Well, that's going to be a project. I think we have like a cup, like two or three. It's not many. So even if we had to do that, we could just fudge it. And they have like they actually have technology now where you can futz the lips on people, and so you can make it look like they're saying like freaking or something like that,
Oh,
and it will actually match when you replace the word.
very
So
cool.
technology has come a long ways with that. I did not know that, but it makes sense, and it's good for the future because you never know where these things happen. And remember that what was the whole line, you know, Samuel L. Jackson, Snakes on a Plane, where
Yeah.
they did the TV version, took out all the swear words, and it was even funnier without the swearing, actually.
Right. Yeah. A
Funnier.
lot of movies are. Yeah.
Yeah.
They definitely are. Um, given that the film is centered around, a comic shop, how did you balance when you talk about humor with more serious themes in the narrative?
Right. So, you know, this was a big point of contention from the script as I worked with the producers, because I had basically expressed to them that this is not a comedy. This is a drama. And I think the one of the producers, you know, he's older too, he couldn't really get around, but it's the comic shop. I'm like, but comics aren't funny. Like you're thinking like comics like my dad thinks, like strips and, you know, a
Yeah.
newspaper, the funnies, the comics. But most comics are not funny. Like they're violent, they're adult, they're like, I mean, they kind of run the gamut. I mean, definitely have like there's more kid themed comics or teenager, but there's stuff that's like really brutal. Even Spawn is pretty brutal, and that's what I liked when I was in middle school. So we did kind of move it to being a little funnier. Like during the writing, it went too far though. There was too much. There was too much that was like gags or like just, I don't know, attempts at making things funny, when I thought this is getting away from what I wanted. It's really a drama film, but it's a comedy in the sense it has a happy ending, right?
Right.
So it would, if it was Golden Globes, it would be comedy or musical, I suppose, because you know it's a happy ending and it's a uplifting kind of story. But I definitely wouldn't want somebody to think, right, that they go into it and it's like, oh, I don't know, like Office Space or The Hangover or Mrs. Doubtfire or something like that, where it's going to be like tons of laughs. We just try to put them in where we can, you
Yeah.
know, because it's like find the opportunities for humor. Don't make something that just because it's drama doesn't mean it has to be boring and like just sit there and everyone has to be serious. Life isn't like that. I mean, I'm the kind of person, I make jokes in the most awkward moments because it's kind of how I deal with things.
Yeah.
Like
Me too.
if something bad happens, I don't know, my brain just goes to making a joke because it's that or cry, and I'd prefer to make a joke. It's just
Absolutely.
how I am. My wife always says, "You can never be serious. You always make a joke." I'm like, I don't know. That's how I deal with things. So I think that comic shop kind of springs from that, where yes, it's a serious story, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to find the opportunities for humor where they're there.
That makes a lot of sense. And you talked about, watching two movies a day, and you subscribe. I read where you subscribe to every streaming service too.
I do.
Wow.
The only one I don't have right now is the Criterion Channel, pretty much. Because I was waiting to catch up on some other classic movies before I add that thing there. But yeah, pretty much everything. I can now think of a second one I don't, which is like I think it's Screambox. It's the
I never
smaller,
even heard of either one of those.
yeah, it's a smaller horror streaming service, but I subscribe to Shudder, so that's where I
Yeah.
watch my horror films.
Okay.
If
I
it's not
love
on,
horror films. Yeah.
me too, yeah, absolutely. And you know, try to see like basically everything, which is good sometimes, and it's also like it's kind of awkward. I mean, I know my wife will laugh at me because there'll be a trailer for a movie and she's like, "Oh, that doesn't look good at all." And for whatever reason, maybe it's too serious, maybe it just looks corny or something. And if it has like one or two A-listers in it, I'm like, "No, it doesn't look good, but I'll see it."
Yeah.
Because I run out of movies to watch that, don't like if there's major people in it, I kind of feel like I should see it. The only kind of movies I'll skip is like true kids movies. I don't mean Pixar. I love Pixar.
Yeah.
And I'll see some like I saw the movie If with my brother-in-law like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. But I didn't see the Emoji Movie. I saw Transformers 1. I thought that was actually better than expected.
Right.
So I'm pretty open-minded usually. Um, the only things I'll probably miss are things like that. And I'm sorry, I can't with like the Hallmark movies. It's the same plot every time I've seen it.
Every time.
And I've seen a good sample size to where I know like I can speak intelligently, but no, I don't need to see 40 more versions of the same movie every year. I don't
Yeah.
care. Like there's
Yeah.
too much good stuff.
If I see my mom watching the Hallmark Channel when I walk through the den, I just shake my head and keep going. I'm like, oh my God, mom, come on.
Yeah. It's like, oh, big city girl moves to, or not moves, it goes on vacation to small town, meets guy, blah, blah, blah. And it's like
They're
the
gonna
same,
they'll
you
have
know,
problems, and at the end they're back together. So right,
exactly.
every
I
single
know
time.
it's some of these things are just so predictable, but yeah, I try to keep a super open mind when it comes to most movies because there are so many movies that I think that I might not have seen if I read the description, if I saw the trailer, but they were acclaimed by critics or whatnot, and then I gave them a chance, and I was so happy that I saw them. And
Right.
maybe there's plenty the other way where they weren't for me and I didn't like them, but it would be a shame to miss out on the gems. So I kind of see that as like I'm like searching for gold here. I'm panning the movies and waiting until the nuggets come out.
You never know. Absolutely. What do you hope the audiences take away from the film?
So the number one takeaway that I really want people to have is it is not too late to do what you want to do, like to become who you might have been, as the quote, said. So just because you're in your 40s or even your 50s and maybe you're not doing exactly what you want, like don't give up because you don't want to be a person who's 75 years old sitting there going, man, like I wonder what would have happened. Or I just can't think of a worse feeling than regret.
Yeah.
And there's the book that I was asked to read when I was in philosophy class in my freshman year. The class is great. It was called The Best Life. I mean, wow, what a title for a class, huh?
Yeah.
So the book was called The Death of Ivan Ilyich. And it's a very depressing book. It really is about a guy who is on his deathbed bemoaning all the things he didn't do and all the things that didn't go right. So a lot of the kids were like, man, why do you have us read this? This is so depressing. And the teacher said, well, it shouldn't be because you kids are all 18, 19 years old. It's not depressing. It's inspiring because you have a chance to make sure you don't end up like this guy. If you were 75 reading it, maybe it's depressing, but he's like, you guys have your whole lives in front of you. Think about this book and don't let this be your life. And so that's the big thing I would say to people is I know we all have to pay the bills. We all have
Yeah.
day jobs. But could you find like a Saturday afternoon or can you find some time in your week where you can pursue what it is that you really want that really brings you life? And who knows, maybe one day that can be your primary job, but even if not, at least you're engaging in something that you really enjoy. Don't just go through the motions until it's too late to try.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't
I,
don't
there's
just don't just exist.
Yeah, I think there's so many inspiring stories of people who switch careers, at middle age and were very successful at their second career. You don't have to keep on the same path you're on just because you've been on it. It really is
Absolutely.
your choice. And that doesn't mean it's not going to be a sacrifice for sure.
Right.
It's hard work if you want to do something you're passionate about. You have to have that burning passion where you'll jump through hoops, walk through, burning embers to get there. But I think it's a lot of people it's tomorrow, it's next year. There will be more time in the future. Well, time is a precious resource and it's passing quickly. So you don't want to let another year pass where you're no closer to your dreams or goals, in my mind.
That's great. What a great way to talk about that movie and what you want out of it. Jonathan, how can people find you on social media, and also how can they watch the movie?
Yeah, so I'm Director Bowen on Instagram, Bowen. And then I also have directorbowen.com where I'm trying to keep the news section updated with like any sort of blog appearances, podcasts, or news about the movie because we have a distributor, Quiver, and we're just making our final deliverables in the next week or so.
Okay.
And it has taken some time because deliverables are things like music cue sheets, errors and emissions insurance to make sure that they're covered, closed captioning. I know a lot of people out there like to watch movies with subtitles.
Yep.
We have to get those made, and we have to make sure that they're actually good and accurate for the film. So then you have like all the other deliverables, a stereo mix, the surround mix, because not everybody's going to have the same equipment at home. So we have to make sure it works on all that. So as we get finished with the deliverables, the distributor will try to find us a good streaming home. Whether that was Netflix or Showtime or Paramount Plus or wherever it might be that would like to take our movie. And I'm sure, of course, there'll be other opportunities. You know how these things go now, where
Yeah.
it will definitely be on iTunes for rent or buy. It will definitely be on Amazon for rent or buy. But free on streaming might also change, right? Sometimes you see a movie, we could have a 2-year run on Netflix, and then after 2 years, it could be on Hulu. I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind of how the world is now. Is I watch movies go from one thing to the other, and I can't tell you how many times I've forced myself to see 3 movies in a day because they said they were leaving Amazon, and then the next day they were on a different streaming service I have.
That's
So
funny.
it's like, what was I hurrying for? It's just moving next door. It's just
Right.
moving down the street. So there will be opportunities, and we'll update people about where they can see it.
So sometime in 2025, you believe?
Yes, we're really hoping for spring because
Okay.
we're at the end of this process, and I think we believe that they'll find it a home sometime in January or February, and they're usually pretty quick about putting it up. Once they sell it, then those streamers want to get it up.
Awesome. That's awesome. I can't wait to see the whole movie. I had a fun time researching you, and I know that Lori had sent me some stuff you wanted me to have, and I read all that. And it was great. But I always like to do my own research and dig deep into somebody and find out as much as I can.
Sure.
And read that you started all this. Talked a little bit about this in high school. You started your own review site, and then went on. I believe you did this also at college at Oregon State, and you
Yeah.
posted over 600 movie reviews. That's just amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
I bet it was. I bet that was. So, I really appreciate your time and coming on today, and I really can't watch the movie. So, thank you so
Oh
much.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited for people to be able to see the movie, and maybe after people have seen it or we down the road, I'd love to come back and we could talk
Absolutely.
about it more. So
Absolutely. Sounds great. Thank you so much again.
thank you.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Okay.